Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of Parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and man, these chapters really were a gut punch.
Yeah, this week really delivered.
I don't know if I've got the intestinal fortitude to go on.
Pancreas. I'm Scott Daly, and this is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of its complicated relationship statuses, troublesome team-ups, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week we continue Arc 11 Blinding with an interlude. We have 11.A side piece, as well as chapters 11.4 and 11.5, or as I like to call them, 11.Oh No Weld and 11.Oh No Rain. First side piece and disjoint spy on break under Fruitsiders meeting and relay all that information to their teammate and boss, Love Lost, who we find out joined up with Cradle. And then our formerly best metal boy delivers some bad Sveta relationship news to Victoria, who takes it super well. Finally, our teamed up team executes a three-pronged attack on the enemies, which goes just about as well as you would expect. Matt, what did you think of these three chapters?
Well, on the one hand, I was about as hype as possible to see the break on through to the other siders join forces and have some like positive interactions. And I'm really, for good or ill, I'm excited to see where this goes. On the other hand, I spent the entire week like physically sick about the thought of Weld breaking up with Sveta. And just like have terrible anxiety about this. It's affecting my life. I'm losing sleep. But other than that, really delightful chapters.
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed them so much and had no ill effects to them at all.
Yeah.
I think.
How about you?
I think these are great. I think these are a great group of chapters. And the thing that I really liked as we started going through them is how kind of these chapters systematically go through each and every one, like different facets of what a cape relationship will look like, right? Like we start off with side piece and disjoint, then we move into the fucking garbage trash mess that is the current Sveta and Weld situation. And then we wrap things up with Rain pining for Aaron in front of Chastity, which is just so many levels of fucked up. So like it's just like this is the relationship episode. And I can't wait to talk about all those great relationships.
Me too. All right, some quick announcements. Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to We've Got Ward.
Yeah, it is. It's 1 year. 1
year ago this week, we transitioned over to Ward from We've Got Worm, starting with Glowworm. It's been a crazy journey so far, hasn't it?
Yeah. Only two more years to go, probably.
Feels about right.
Yeah, it's really cool. 1 year doing this. We're coming up on 2 years doing this show in general in March, I think. And I think that's about when we're going to hit our 100th episode, too, is sometime in March. So it's a really exciting time. It's kind of crazy that we've been doing this long. It doesn't feel like it's been this long. But we've covered like millions of words, and it only took us millions of hours.
Well, maybe we can do something special for the 2 year or for the 100 episode mark or something. Who knows?
I think we are. I think we'll do something. I haven't quite come up with some ideas yet, but my brain is turning.
Yeah.
Figure that stuff
out.
All right. Well, those of you listening to the recording probably heard something different at the beginning of this episode. You probably heard a different introduction. Basically, what we are doing is we are swapping out our intro and outro music, because every time we have published it under the current song we get copyright flagged on YouTube, which limits, I think it blocks like 4 countries, including Canada, from listening on YouTube. I know that a lot of you listen via other devices and other programs, but we just felt like that was really limiting, and we didn't want to like continually be copyright flagged. So Matt has graciously written 2 pieces of new music for our intro and outro. The one we played at the start of the episode will be one option, and the one we're going to play at the very end of the episode will be the other. So what we're asking you guys for is to let us know which you like better so we can decide which one. I think, Matt, we're in the situation where we both like both of them and we can't pick which one we want more. So we thought it would be fun to kind of toss that to the listeners.
Yeah, they both have pros and cons in my mind. So, and it's really hard to be objective about something that you have created. So yeah, please let us know.
Yeah, I think so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of set up a Twitter poll for that. But if you don't use Twitter, so you can't vote via Twitter or whatever, you can send us an email or you can comment in the Reddit thread, and we'll just say intro music or outro music, and that's how we'll differentiate between the two songs. So sorry to see the song we picked go, because we really, really liked that song and thought it fit perfectly, but I think you made some good music here, and I'm kind of excited to see which one everyone likes more.
Yeah, I think it's better this way.
Also, at this moment in the podcast, I haven't cut it into the intro and outro yet, so I'm not entirely sure which 20 seconds of your song I'm going to pick yet. So I don't even know what it's going to sound like yet. Yay.
Yay. I will leave it to your discerning ear.
Well, I'll probably shoot it to you after I'm done just to make sure you like it.
Fair enough. All right, last announcement. So we made up our minds about what we're going to do with the discussion questions, and that is we're going to move that section to the end of the show. Is that right, Scott?
Yeah. I think we just kind of figured what happened was this past week we got a lot of feedback that was to the effect of, no, you're getting rid of the discussion question. Don't do that. Almost to the same level that we got of people saying that it's their least favorite part of the show. So we just kind of figured it just fit better at the back of the show. We didn't want to get rid of it entirely because I think, like a lot of you, we really do enjoy the audience interaction. And, looking at the Reddit thread this week, we saw the dip in the activity because people aren't discussing and talking about a discussion question. So there's just not as much to talk about in each individual thread. So we want to encourage that kind of communication, that kind of discussion going. So we didn't want to just get rid of it. So we're just going to move it. We're just going to move it to the back.
Yeah. And, after several episodes, we might assess how that's going and then maybe make further changes. We're always kind of tweaking, but I think that's going to be preferable. It's preferable for us because this way we don't run out of gas, in the last part of discussing the actual chapters themselves, due to having talked about the discussion question for a long time at the top of the episode.
I agree. I'd much rather have to rush through the discussion question comments than rush through the chapter analysis. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And another thing I'm going to pledge to do is I'm going to put timestamps back in the show once we start doing the discussion question stuff. So even if you want to skip it, we'll have timestamps for each chapter, for the discussion question section, and for the outro. So you can easily jump between all that stuff. It takes me a little bit more time to do that, so I stopped doing it because I'm lazy, but it's just probably a best practice, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And as for today, there was no discussion question last week for all of the reasons that we've been talking about. And also because we're doing 3 chapters today rather than the normal 2. And so we're going to just spend all the time we can talking about those chapters. And that said, let's move on into it.
All right, let's do it.
We start chapter 11.A, which is our first interlude of Blinding. And it's a surprising character. It's Side Piece, our favorite member of Love Lost's crew. And the first line reminds us of Side Piece's trademark terrible puns,
which are my favorite things ever, as we saw at the top of the episode. So I really love this chapter. I've loved Side Piece as this weird, funny, hilarious character, and I like this little moment we get to kind of dive more deeply into who she is as a person. And I think we have a lot to say about that. But one of the things that I particularly enjoyed, Matt, about this chapter is the voice of it. This is the interludes in this book are written in this third person voice. We're not in first person, but they still the narrative still kind of strongly mirrors the personality of the whoever is the point of view character in the chapter. And I liked how much we saw side piece isms, leak into the narrative voice to the not just in the dialogue. That made it really enjoyable for me. And gosh, I loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. She does have a very strong kind of presence when she's, a third person character. and when we're in her head, it's just as strong. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of lets you see there's moments where like her particular like really kind of crude, outrageous type of attitude leak out, and because we're in her head and because we can see that shift in narrative voice, we kind of start to get to map maybe if there's specific reasons she's doing that at specific times, if that's something related to her personality and stuff. And I think that voice in here allows you to do that, and I can't wait to talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. So Sidepiece and Disjoint trudge through the snowy woods on a spying mission, with Disjoint using his power to assist his girl through the underbrush.
He's literally giving her his hand to help her walk over difficult ground.
Yeah, right.
It's great.
It's a really, I mean, it's great because it's showing like his conscientiousness. It's perfect show don't tell, right? Because it's showing that he's looking out for her, he's taking care of her, he's supporting her, and they're having this back and forth dialogue. You know, the two are flirting and discussing the particulars of their mission at the same time, and you really get a sense of like how these two are together.
Right. And I think that's what a lot of this, especially this early part of the chapter, is doing, right? Is defining their relationship for us. And I think it's really fascinating when you take that and contrast it to some of the other relationships we have defined for us, or at least updated for us in the chapters following this one.
Yeah. So I just like this little detail that Sidepiece has these pistols kind of hidden in the space where her abdomen used to be.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun stuff that's done with her power in this chapter that we'll get to. Mm-hmm. So the content of their discussion is that they're talking about Love Lost and her team, with Sidepiece putting forth a thesis that Love Lost values information above all else, which is why they're on this spying mission. But Disjoint disagrees and basically says Love Lost's focus, what she want, is kind of something like to exist in a perpetual state of rage, and getting the information is just instrumental to that end.
Yeah, I really love this conversation, not just for the content of it, but what it's kind of in the show don't tell kind of way saying about Disjoint and Sidepiece. Like, Sidepiece offers up this information, they're talking, and she says Love Lost isn't that smart. She's not like smart in a book's sense kind of way, and not even in like a street sense kind of way. It's more just that she just has a very good eye. She's very observant, and she values information, and then goes into this whole like explanation of the different kind of warlords or gang leaders that she's seen, and how they prioritize money and favors over specifically information, and that's not the way Love Lost is really operating. And Disjoint like disagrees with her, and I love the way in which he disagrees with her. Like, he doesn't just shut her down, like he isn't just dismissive of her. He's just like he doesn't just say no, you're wrong. He says, I think you're a little off. He says, he communicates. He says, I don't agree with the information part. Like, I think that's more of a means to an end than it is the end itself. And I'm pointing this out because I really do think that what Wildbow is doing here in the first part of this chapter is constructing this like moderately healthy relationship, right? Like, we've already talked about how Disjoint is kind of helping her through the brush. He seems very caring and concerned for her. He disagrees with her in a very communicative, controlled manner. And like, there's this moment where Sidepiece like immediately says she'd like bang the shit out of Love Lost if gotten the opportunity to. And he doesn't like bristle up and get all jealous or whatever. He just kind of says he can't say anything on the bounds that it would incriminate him. And then she's like, no, like, don't worry about it. Like, I don't care. Like, it's just this, like, they're communicating and they're being honest with each other. And it's kind of remarkable considering how borderline crazy these people are.
Yeah. No, basically it's just a string of positive examples of how to communicate and interact with each other.
Yeah.
Even in a situation where you don't agree, which I think is where it really is telling.
Right. And I don't like, it's not just that like Disjoint is being like the chivalrous gentleman, right? It's like there's this symbiotic protected relationship here, because in a few minutes he exposes himself like because of having to remove his eyes and his ears and makes himself very vulnerable without her support. And she's there to protect him. Like, this is not just one person like looking out for the other. This is them looking out for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So Side Piece actually thinks explicitly about this relationship. She thinks about how Disjoint is the first time she's been with a guy who gives her this thing that she needs, which is like someone actually on her level to kind of rely on in a mutual way.
Yeah.
But she doesn't think that she's very good at giving him what he needs, which is, in her words, just someone to be nice to him.
Yeah, and I really like this background information we get on Side Piece. She says that even at a young age, she's been dating people older than her, right? She says like when she was 14, she was dating 16-year-olds. When she was 16, she was dating 18-year-olds. And then we see the moment at which her trigger event occurs. She says around 18, everything went to hell and she didn't come out of it in one piece. It is interesting here that like she doesn't like go into detail about the trigger event, right? Like, I think that's kind of like a usual formula for these different Cape point of view chapters, that we kind of learn maybe some of the specifics of their trigger event. And we don't do that here. It's almost as if like she's still like so uncomfortable and unsettled with it that she doesn't even want to think about it too much.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. Like, it was definitely a choice to shy away from like even the general nature of what happened. It was basically just, I mean, she actually makes a joke out of it, right? She says she didn't come out of it in one piece, which is a classic Side Piece joke. But the thing is, like, I think you've pointed out that like she uses humor somewhat to deal with things that she's not comfortable with.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just humor. She uses her sexuality too whenever she gets in an uncomfortable situation. But I mean, we see that whatever happens during this trigger event, when she manages to collect herself, by the time she's 20, she's now going after a 30-year-old guy. She's going 10 years older than now. And I think that the nature, like the tense of the text is very revealing here, because it says it had taken her a while to try again. When she'd been 20, offering herself to 30-year-olds to see if they bite. And I think like the phrase offering yourself is very specific here, right? Like that's not a relationship. That's not any kind of mutual kind of thing. It's nothing like what she and Disjoint have. This is her off, like just using her sexuality and giving it up to these guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that goes along with her name, Side Piece, which is this great pun, but it's also a term for like just a girl on the side that you don't really care about, that you just hook up with and then get rid of when you're tired of them. Like that's kind of what that means. And that's what she's labeled her as. And so we start seeing this narrative build around her as this woman, this girl who used sex and intimacy like that as kind of a survival mechanism, like attaching herself to people that were older than her. And we don't know the details of it yet, right? Because she doesn't really dive into that kind of stuff, but we just see that pattern, right, where she's using it this way. And I think it probably would like fit the parahuman mold if she had some sort of parent-father issue or something.
Yeah. I like drawing attention to her name like you just did, because, you know, she chose her name in all likelihood.
Yeah.
So this is once again kind of her like taking an epithet someone might have used to describe her and kind of owning it and turning it into a joke, which goes perfectly with her character.
Yeah.
Like I love, this is like my favorite Wildbow thing is like every character is consistent in like every detail in a way that is just endlessly rewarding to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, I think all this is used to really draw that line between the current relationship she's in and those past ones. She's very much used to giving guys the only thing they wanted, which is sex. And suddenly she has this guy who she admits likes all that stuff, sure, but wants more than that. And she's like, we get this little bit of uncertainty here where she's not sure if she knows how to long-term be that type of person he likes, or the type of thing that he wants from her. And I love that. I love that. That's a fascinating little dynamic on their relationship. And again, one of the most healthy relationships depicted on the show today by far.
Yeah. I wonder where this is all going to go.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I really wanted to point out before we move on is just in in this frame that we've just built of her, we see this moment where Disjoint accurately depicts Love Lost, like you said, as this woman who doesn't just want revenge in the short term. She doesn't just want to like kill Rain and then just be, okay, I've accomplished my revenge, I did it. She wants to live in this perpetual state of rage and revenge just forever. And that makes Side Piece feel uncomfortable. That she said hearing that and kind of agreeing with it makes her feel uncomfortable. The playful smile dropped away and she found herself staring out across the parking lot. But what does she do right after that? After this moment of uncomfort, she immediately starts talking about like how she would hook up with Love Lost. She immediately goes back to the crude. I'm just this person that loves sex all the time, and I just want to bang her. And like it is how she deals with uncomfortable situations. It's how she humor and that kind of stuff is how she deals with this. And it's so telling that you see it in that moment.
Yeah, I guess it's a coping mechanism,
sure,
you could say.
Sure. And I'm not saying that like sex is bad or whatever, or hooking up with whoever you feel like. Everyone go have sex with whoever you want to have sex with. As long as it's consensual, do whatever you want. But I mean, I think it's just interesting that the text is drawing these lines about this character that we've loved seeing all this dirty, ridiculous, hilarious stuff she's been saying in all the chapters we've seen her, and now we're kind of starting to understand the psychology underneath it. It makes her a fun character that I'm now even more interested in.
Yeah, fun, but also like more depth because I mean, and you can use sexual thoughts and sexual behaviors to like distract yourself and medicate yourself from your problems just as well as you can use any other kind of addiction. Or like fixation. So that's kind of how I see her after this interlude. Like, yes, there's still the humor. There's still like the kind of the crazy energy that makes her kind of a chaotic but fun force in the story. But also from inside, you see that it's from a place of, I don't know, maybe having some problems that she needs to distract herself from.
Yeah.
Put it that way. So Disjoint uses his power once they get out of the woods to send his eyes and ears to spy on the meeting of the Undersiders and breakthrough. She has to keep Disjoint safe and balanced while he does this, and she ends up having to throw some exploding acid gallbladder at a mall employee who stumbles upon them. Yeah,
and this is one of the moments that, like we were talking about, that really makes me like them as a couple because, scaring the hell out of this poor mall security guy aside, Disjoint has made himself vulnerable to spy on people, and she is there to protect him while he's doing so. And she's got his back when he needs it, and he's helping her out when she needs it. And that's teamwork. It's good. It's good. I mean, what they're doing is bad, but the teamwork part is good.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, the fact that so he takes his ears out, right?
Yeah.
He takes like the whole ear apparatus out, and so he loses his sense of balance.
Yeah.
So not only is she keeping him safe, but she's literally keeping him steady. She's balancing him physically, which is a great metaphor for they are each other's stability, literally.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because at the start of this chapter, he was literally giving her his hand, and now she's literally keeping him upright.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
So after getting all the info on the team meeting, the missing pieces couple joins a fight in progress with the rest of the team. The team fights a patrol block squad, and we come to understand the details of Side Piece's power in this chapter a bit more. We learn that she actually feels pain as she tears away chunks of herself, quite significant pain. And we also learn that different organs serve as different types of ordnance, which we may have known that, but we learned more detail about it. Like, for example, she uses kidneys full of kidney stones to take down 10 people. I thought, one interesting thing about being in Side Piece's head is that the text doesn't dwell too much on whether the people that she's attacking are dead or if they're bleeding out or what exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, it's just not a priority for her, not something she worries about.
No, yeah, we only get to see that at the very end of the fight. See that they're probably not dead, but also need several ambulances.
Yeah, and isn't it Disjoint who's the one who's like, we should call some ambulances?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that highlights kind of a difference in their characters. And, him being the one person on the team actually who would even think of that.
Yeah.
Like they could, if he hadn't said that, you get the sense they would have just left those people there.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're absolutely right that I love how the writing, like, it gets really, really detailed in the feelings as she uses her powers, right? Like, it's disgusting. It's so disgusting and painful sounding, but I just love the writing. Like, she gripped the kidney and set to tearing it away. There was a sound like wet cardboard ripping, audible snapping as the congealed and hardened part around her old injuries broke away, and her right knee trembles with the effort and the pain. It hurts her. She almost collapses to the ground because this hurts so much, and yet she kind of loves it.
Yeah, right. I kind of went on a mental tangent about this idea that, like, we don't really have any reason to think she's a case 53. We haven't been, other than her abdomen, everything else about her looks normal.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, and we also kind of suspect that her abdomen, like, heals really fast. Like, she basically can regenerate these organs. We don't know how fast, but you get the sense that it must be on the order of a few days, right? Or maybe even less. But, like, she's basically constantly, like, torn up and gaping open at the abdomen because she's just using her power all the time. I guess the point of the tangent was, like, I kind of suspected that her power would heal her entirely back to normal if she would stop using her power, but she just never gives it a chance to.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I find that so fascinating. I also like the details of powers. Sometimes, like, her arm strength is slightly, like, better than average. It's like It's like the shard is like, oh, you're gonna need to throw these pieces of yourself, aren't you? Well,
Yeah.
here's slightly improved arm strength that'll help you out with that.
Right. Yeah. Like, and she's a pretty good shot with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, of course, need extra arm strength to physically rip your own body apart.
Yeah, that is required. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just fuck you, shards. It's like,
yeah, it's great.
Not only do your organs explode and you have the desire to rip them out of you, here, let's just make just a little stronger. And you can do it. Still hurts you.
Help you out.
Still want to collapse on the ground.
Yeah, it's great. So Sidepiece thinks a few times in this chapter about missing Damsel, but still being angry at her. And she thinks in the course of this, there was a kind of romance in the mental picture of the two of them too beat up to move, bloody and dirty, and the facades cracking, emotion pouring out.
Yes, but this is purely platonic, Matt. She specifies right after that. It's purely platonic. Wink.
Yeah.
But again, I think once again, this immediately follows a thought about her relationship that makes her feel uncomfortable. She thinks that Disjoint, like, she's thinking about this fighting, and she's worried that Disjoint might not be the type of person that is able to have her back during some of the, like, real bad fights. And so it's almost as if, like, she's got this relationship that is this relatively normal, equitable relationship, and she doesn't know what to do with it. And so in that moment of concern, she thinks about a relationship with someone that it would not be that way at all. That would be chaotic and destructive and all the things that all her previous interactions with people probably were.
Yeah, something she's more used to.
Yeah.
Ashley being the constant symbol of chaos and destruction in the story.
So she basically says in this moment that her goal is going to be to bring Ashley back down into the mud, right? Does that worry you about Ashley at all, Matt? Because there's this other Ashley out there that is just getting restless, and Sidepiece would probably get along with her a lot more than the other one.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but I think that's a great opening. Like, I'm not too worried about our Ashley, like, succumbing to Sidepiece's, urges to come back and join Love Lost team. Like, that just doesn't strike me as something that Ashley would even really consider. But Damsel, she's still in that phase, mentally, where she's going to be like, well, I mean, as long as you're working for me, right? But we've also seen that she can compromise and, with practical reality when she has to. I don't know. Now that you've made me think of it, it does seem like something that has potential.
Yeah. Plus, like, with Love Lost's claw hands, and Nailbiter's extendo hands that can turn into claws. There's just a lot of like claw hands action going on in that group, especially if Damsel joins. It's like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I love this. I love this idea that all of the teams have their own seating charts. So at this point, the battle's over, and Lovelost is able to communicate with the team using her Tinker Gloves as a kind of air keyboard that automatically texts all of their phones. And they have this rather lengthy conversation where they're speaking and she's texting them. Side Piece has a super annoying ringtone on her phone that goes off every time Lovelost says anything. And eventually Nailbiter like threatens Side Piece with the T-1000 finger, and she complies and turns off the ringtone. It's a really great series of beats, all told.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think we're kind of doing is because I'm going into my, oh, look, this is revealing about the character, and let's dive deep and talk about the character, is we've kind of been ignoring the fact that this whole chapter is just frequently hilarious as well. Like, yes, it's this deep, interesting, introspective dive into this character that we didn't know much about before now, but also it's really fucking funny throughout the entire thing. And that I haven't been focusing on that as much in either of you because we're really exploring this, but you're absolutely right. This is hilarious. And there's so many beats like this throughout the chapter that are just like, just her being ridiculous. Like when they get to the battle at first and she's like tossing out puns and Disjoint is like yelling at her, like pretending to be in physical pain, and like Nailbiter like throws fingers or like whips fingers at her to make her like stop. And it's just it's all so funny. She's so irreverent and hilarious and delightful.
Yeah, I mean it is funny, and I agree, of course, but like it's both funny and kind of interesting how she keeps pushing it too far. Like,
yeah,
they're kind of pretending to be annoyed with her, but basically a Nailbiter is telling her like, you're approaching the line of like actually really annoying me, when she does the thing where she like almost stabs her. You get the sense Nailbiter probably wouldn't have actually stabbed her, but like everyone like freezes and it's clearly a tense moment, so maybe she would have, just to make a point.
Yeah, I don't like. I think that's like they're dealing with her is constantly her walking right up to that line and them having to physically stop her. But it is interesting that like when we get back to their headquarters in a bit and Cradle shows up and like everything gets super serious, like Side Piece is like knowingly like, even I know the times when to not pull shit and be ridiculous. Like even she's able to in those moments at least go, okay, this is enough of my nonsense now. Yeah,
I think you're right about that. So yeah. So then we basically, they talk about the meeting with the Undersiders. So at first we get some clues that lead us to suspect that this team is involved in the attack on the Navigators somehow. We're not exactly sure how yet, but it'll be cleared up by the end of the chapter, I think. We also get a bit of a rehash on the state of all the major factions that kind of go over like what Teacher's doing, what some of these mercenaries are doing. We're kind of just setting all the pieces on the board.
Right.
Then Lovelost gets some kind of warning that we're not too clear on at the time, and she rushes the team back to base where they find Cradle. So do you assume that like the urgent warning that brought her back to the base was sensing Cradle arriving?
Yeah, because we get this line from Nailbiter as they're rushing back that says, new security measures extending her sensory ranges and feeling out for tech. It takes a minute. So my guess was she increased the stuff like primarily because of Lookout, like looking for certain kind of tech, and it picked up on Cradle's tech, and so she got a sense that someone with tech was in her place, so they rush back, because I get the feeling that it's not until they get there and see him that they know it's him there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I wasn't sure one way or the other, but yeah, I think they definitely knew there was an intruder. So Cradle essentially confirms that he's the one behind the Navigator attack at this point, and that he was using Disjoint's power to do it, or a scan of Disjoint's power. And basically he says he's working on version 2.0. He wants to get his own scan of Disjoint's power, so maybe it'll be a little bit different and maybe worse than the first one. And he wants to do something even worse than what he already did.
Yeah, and it's not just Disjoint's power, though. He kind of gestures towards Side Piece and wants a scan of her power. And her response to that is, as long as it doesn't hurt me, go for it.
Yeah.
The implications of this are very, very bad, Matt.
Yep. I thought it was interesting that Side Piece actually pretty much sits out this conversation. Like, not only does she know not to be irreverent, but she doesn't really inject herself into it at all. Like she gets that this is kind of the dangerous people are talking now, and she should maybe lay low.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing I liked the most about this is we've gotten a reveal. We know who was responsible for the navigators now. We don't know the details of it. It turns out Cradle wasn't there himself. Supposedly, they just he built the tech and then hired some mercenaries to go do it, which we get the kind of indication that they're going to be doing that again. The thing that I love about this so much is that there was a chapter an arc ago in which both Side Piece and Disjoint were captured. They were in the hero's custody. They had them, and then they had to let them go. And now we learn that Disjoint's power is responsible for the horrible thing that happened to the navigators, and now we learn that Side Piece's power and Disjoint's power might be used in some other thing that Cradle wants to be even worse than the last thing. And so I checked the timing on this, and I was curious, and Victoria and company let Disjoint and Side Piece go the same day as the attack on the navigators occurred. So it's probably pretty unlikely that Cradle got Disjoint's power after this moment, built his tech, and then unleashed it all in that same night. That's probably too small of a window. But when you think about Victoria, and when you think about how frustrated Victoria is about the fact that they're having to compromise and make deals with people and not actually punish the bad people for doing the bad stuff. And then we see this moment where two people that they captured, were used to do terrible things. I don't think the logic, the rational timing of that all is going to be something she's worrying about. I think from Victoria's point of view, this is, again, something that she should have taken care of, or that the system should have taken care of, or these two people should not have been allowed to walk away. They should have been locked up, and therefore this stuff shouldn't have happened. And I just worry, if version 2.0 does something even worse than the navigators attack, if this succeeds, what is Victoria going to do? What is her reaction going to be to that? Because we could see an already frustrated Victoria get real pissed off.
Yeah, I like your point, and I think whatever Victoria's reaction is, it's also likely that a lot of this book is actually centered around the PR aspect of things, the public, not just the public perception, but the way things are spun and the way people use pieces of information against the capes. So whether Victoria takes this well or not, this is the kind of thing that could exactly be spun to say this cape was released and later that day his power was used in this attack, and that sentence is factually true, and to a normal person it sounds much more damning, whereas we know the details, we know it didn't quite work that way, but still it could still be used that way as propaganda. So yeah, definitely an interesting I guess coincidence. I'm really glad you pointed this out, though.
Yeah, I love that, because I was thinking of just how our protagonist would react to it. I didn't stop to think of the whole, anti-parahuman sentiment. I think you're absolutely right that you could build this narrative around the fact that, look, these are the people that are supposed to, that have we've given up our authority to protect us. The heroes are supposed to be the ones that are protecting us. And this is what they're doing. They're letting the bad guys go. And then the bad guys are doing horrible, horrible things to people. That's a very easy narrative to construct. That completely, misses out the contextual detail of the decisions to let people go and stuff like that. But is a really great narrative if you want to show that capes are bad in all situations.
Right. Yep. Well, yeah. So that was the Side Piece interlude, and we basically wrap it up on this ominous note of what's Cradle going to do. And then we move on into 11.4, where we're going to be discussing what is going to be done about Cradle.
Yeah.
And the first sentence is the schism remained.
It's just
which is
wonderful.
Yeah. And basically what's going on is the more aggressive heroes are not present at this meeting, and thus the meeting place feels very empty to Victoria. There are a handful of capes that we know, including Weld, Cinereal, and Citrine, and I think a couple others. There's also somebody named Aleph Wolf, who I don't remember hearing about in the story, but apparently they represent the Wild West kind of hero that's emerged in the post-apocalypse.
Yeah, I think we've had his teams name dropped in the past as talking about the different teams that have joined up with them, but I don't think we've ever gotten to see him specifically. Yeah. I think I love that opening line. I love the schism remained, and I love how much all of this early part sets the tone of the chapter. You automatically get the feeling that things aren't going to go too great in between any kind of people in this chapter, because you've defined the schism, you've defined this unease that Victoria feels by the lack of heroes present, and I love that we echo that beat later on in the chapter when she's in a different room for the exact opposite problem. And I love this thing she thinks aloud. I wondered if there was ever a group size that would feel natural. And I kind of think, probably not. You're probably always going to be uncomfortable for some reason.
Yeah. So what just jumped into my head just now is D&D alignment. And basically it seems like the chaotic and the lawful heroes are sort of breaking apart from each other. Like here you basically have the lawful heroes. The more like all the heroes are good, they're on the side of good, but the more chaotic ones are thinking this isn't what we want. Like we want to get blood and revenge, and we want to hit back hard.
Yeah.
So and then simultaneously, there's also a lawful chaotic divide among the villains, with the Undersiders definitely falling more on the lawful side. So there's kind of this realignment that we're seeing in these chapters of the more chaotic elements not necessarily gravitating toward each other in a positive way, but clashing more openly, and the more lawful elements aligning to try to stabilize things.
Yeah.
I think that's you don't necessarily have to go with the D&D metaphor there, but I think that's a way of framing what's happening with the both villain and hero capes in these sections.
Yeah, I like that. That the more chaotic elements are going further to the wings, whereas the lawful elements are both sides are kind of coalescing together a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well said.
Yeah, the mayor is also here, Matt.
Yeah.
Yay. And I love how the text describes Citrine in this moment. She's wearing a yellow shirt that Victoria describes as so striking, it is more striking than some of the hero costumes here, but yet is saying that her presence brings even more darkness to an already dark room. She's wearing the color of the sun, but brings only darkness. And I love that so much. I love it.
Yeah, right. I mean, and you know what she means. Like it's her personality. Right. It's her kind of creepiness.
Right. And I mean, again, it shows Victoria's just general uncomfortable nature at dealing with people like these. Like, she's had to make all these choices throughout the last few chapters and arcs where she's like dealing with people that she doesn't feel 100% comfortable with dealing with, but she feels like she has to. And this is one that she's definitely uncomfortable with. And I think that description kind of represents that really well.
Yeah. I mean, we've got Citrine, who was literally a villain, and Foil here, who, I mean, is technically a villain, who I think both represent the, lawful evil side of things at this point. Because Foil is someone who basically wants stability and security, and that's why she's with the Undersiders, because fundamentally that's what they give her. So yeah, Foil represents the Undersiders, and she communicates that her team believes Cradle was responsible for the attack, plus a few other details like Lion Wing and 2 Case-53s were working with Cradle for that attack.
Yeah, and an unknown hireling too. And so the thing that I love about this, first of all, is that they're talking about that they have a pretty good feeling that Cradle did it or Cradle supplied the tech to these people. But the really juicy bits that it came from this joint and aren't known, I guess. So that saves that as a fun reveal for later and goes into our worry about where that could go with the Victoria connection. But we also learned that the two Case 53s were not part of the irregular. So I remember when we thought for a second there that they were Case 53s, that Sveta would have a really hard time with that because they could be two people she knew. And all the ex-irregulars she has very, very complex relationships with. But I think it says that they were not part of that group. Interesting enough that Weld knows that, but we don't get any names about who these two Case 53s are.
Yeah, right. It makes me wonder if there's someone that we should know. I kind of assumed not, but maybe we'll be surprised.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. So there's some discussion amongst the heroes over whether they can trust this information from the Undersiders. Relay is actually being a huge pain in the ass here, and he keeps doing his like psychic read on everybody present and just like not being very trusting.
Yeah, he sure is. But to be fair, they're dealing with tattletale information here, so like I kind of understand the reticence. Plus, he's probably like reading a bunch of really conflicted emotions from everyone right now. Like Victoria. Victoria is feeling pretty conflicted about this whole thing. Foyle has some really conflicted opinions of her team that we'll get to hear about in a bit. So like he's probably like sensing all these people and just getting these like really complex conflicting emotions, and it's just like it makes him very, very concerned about everything.
Yeah. I like the bit where she says like that she's not too certain that her team is in the right, and he's like, yeah, but it might be worse that your head is so full of conflicting feelings about your team that you don't know which end is up, or something along those lines. And it's like it's a great way of telling us how uncertain Foyle actually is. I mean, we can read between the lines. Actually, she's so like passive aggressive toward Tattletale consistently. But this is just kind of a confirmation that her membership in the Undersiders seems very uncertain.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Relay's still like a real dick though. Like Foyle says, she says that if I were 100%, and then Relay retorts with a fallen dig for no reason other than to just like dig at Rain. If you were 100% clear you were on the right side, you'd be a fallen. And then he just like looks at Rain. I think this is fascinating because like we have this, like you're absolutely right that we have these lawful good heroes gathering together and grouping up. But I think this serves as like a friendly reminder that although Breakthrough is definitely a hero organization, not all the other heroes are like super happy with the people that are on their team. Like that these are people with bad history, and they're not just like super happy that these guys are here and hanging out with us and on our side now. And it's like we're seeing that kind of inter-team conflict there. Yeah.
Relay's behavior actually like reminds me of Tattletale a little bit here, because he's basically like pushing and prodding and saying inflammatory things to try to get a reaction. So that he can use his power to get a read based on that reaction, I think.
Right.
Which is ironic because Tattletale is specifically the one who he's not wanting to join.
Yeah, these damn thinkers, Matt. Nothing but trouble.
I know, fucking thinkers. So Victoria takes a deep breath before telling the assembled people that they've agreed to address the Cradle situation in tandem with the Undersiders. So basically saying, yep, we're teaming up with the villains. And she explains both teams will be needed to address Love Lost and Cradle, and probably March somewhere in there at the same time. Meanwhile, they ask the other teams to look into the time stasis and other fuckery situation. And possibly all the other heroes are going to have to fight the mercenary group who is intent on causing some kind of disaster by interfering with these stasis effects. Citrine mentions that there's not only Dauntless, who is kind of the one that gets talked about in the fandom so much, but also Jotun and Alabaster in the Baccarat time stop field from the Leviathan fight. There's also people who were trapped in time stasis during Bakura's original bombing run, and then there's also people who got trapped in the Scar in the wake of Pigot's bombing run. So there's a lot of possibilities of what could be going wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what this section of the story is doing for us, right? Like, I think the community hears, people interested in people trapped in time bubbles, and they're like, Dauntless, which is understandable because he's this guy who had this like the super high power potential, right? And so it makes sense. But the book is saying, yeah, totally Dauntless, but also there's all these other people.
Right. I mean, I think we've talked about this recently, actually, this idea that Wildbow makes sure that he's throwing a lot of chaff into the story to make us, we can be relatively confident that like one of the things that some character has said at some point is going to turn out to have been the answer, but we don't know which one. But like the heroes actually did say like, who could be behind this attack? Well, it could be among the other 43 things they said it could be a tinker scan of someone else's power, which is exactly what it was apparently. So
yeah,
the answers are always there. It's just Wildbow wants to make it so that he keeps us guessing, and that's great.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I like that. We know we're reading a story, right? So we know that there's this big name character that's revolving around the thing. So obviously we assume that it probably is going to have something to do with this big name character. But that's not how like when characters act like they would act in a story, that's when they start to feel a little fake. That's when that word contrived pops out, right? Like when a character is like, well, we're just assuming it's Dauntless because obviously everyone likes Dauntless. But no, that's not like they're trying to solve a mystery within the world of the story. And they need, and it's one of a ton of possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the heroes still have no real idea, or rather they have lots of possible ideas, but no solid ideas for why these groups are interested in the time manipulation effects. Citrine actually implies that her power might be able to interact with some of these effects, such as with Greyboy loops, and maybe turn them off, but she refuses to do so. At first, Victoria assumes like because you're horrible, but then she goes on to say like it's because the thinkers say don't do that. Yeah.
So the story's doing a lot of heavy lifting here, Matt, to build up that fucking with the time loop stuff is a bad idea. Thinkers say no. The wardens looked into it and said, Even Teacher was like, fuck no, I'm not, no. Messing with these things is such a bad idea that they're definitely going to get messed with.
Yeah.
I like that you pulled out that, Victoria's initial reaction to Citrine was anger, right? She said, I've looked into it. I think I might be able to do it, but I'm not going to do it. And she's like, oh, so you're just going to choose not to help the people that are suffering for eternity? And then she provides a reason. But I mean, like we said, Victoria doesn't like Citrine too much, and she's dealing with her out of necessity. And I like that we're getting reminders that like she's not cool with this.
Yep.
And she's
definitely.
also, and it's the mayor. She's like literally the law now. Like Victoria's a lawful good hero, and Citrine is the law.
Right. We talked, I think, a few times about this idea that like her heuristic, which she hasn't actually thought of in quite a while, is like first obey the law. And I think the reason she hasn't thought of it in a while is that the law just doesn't help in like any of these situations anymore. They're just in this completely Wild West scenario. I mean, that was explicitly it. Like they were like, man, this is some Wild West shit. You call the police, you say, we have some supervillains in custody, and they say, we can't do anything with them. Let them go. So yeah, she just has to, it's really kind of disordered her kind of way of thinking through things. And yeah, here we are in the situation where she's working with villains now.
Yeah.
So,
but she's still Victoria though, and we see that right here in the end of this conversation where she asks for information on the victims of the time loops. And Citrine says, I will. Bakuda's victims, the 3 heroes. And Victoria is immediately, not all heroes. Alabaster and Jotun were white supremacists, which is true, obviously. They were. They were part of Empire 88. but it's so on brand Vicky to like need to make that clarification, right? It's like, they're not all heroes. These two were bad guys. We need to remember that.
Right. I mean, and also the fact that they were trapped in stasis because they were helping fight Leviathan. So like they were doing a good thing.
Right. I mean, it's complicated.
In this particular instance. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, I get exactly what you mean though, that like, she's just not, I think you're exactly right, actually, that she literally never lets anyone get away with like forgetting about the past. Right.
Yeah.
I should remove the word literally from that, but yeah, this is yet another example of like, nope, not going to let anyone forget about the past. And this is her whole thing, right? This is supposed to be a story about second chances. And she's making sure that Alabaster and Jotun aren't just given carte blanche.
Yeah.
So,
which is really complicated considering there are several members of Empire 88 currently on a hero group right now. And we're about to specifically learn about them in a bit. Two people we knew from the last story are now are part of a hero group. And
yeah,
I mean, that's complex.
That was really interesting to learn, actually, because I think we might have had an inkling of that, but now we know who. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely knew from very, very early on that was happening, but to put names to it makes it a lot more real.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So Foyle suggests that the heroes consider hiring mercenary help to their side since they're about to be basically fighting a war on three fronts.
It is like a really good time to be a Cape mercenary right now. Like everyone's hiring you to do stuff.
Yeah, right. The reason I pull that specifically is that I can't imagine that won't be employed, actually, like, because all we kind of need now, we have Vicky working with the villains. Now she needs to deal with the moral ambiguity of working with somebody who just goes with whoever's paying the most.
Yeah.
You know, say what you want about the Undersiders. At least they have an ethos.
That's like the second time we've done that in 2 weeks. We did the same thing with Cauldron last week.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Oh man, we're gonna get so much shit for that.
I know. Yeah. So as the meeting ends, Vicky checks in with a few people, and then leaves with nothing dramatic or horrible happening. The end.
Yep. End of chapter. Let's move on.
So, no, she goes and talks to Weld, and he kind of pretends that he wants to talk about the need to reach out to the shepherds about the idea that Alabaster and Jotun might be involved in things because apparently it's Victor and Rune who are part of the shepherds.
Yeah.
But he kind of actually wants to talk about Sveta.
Like about how happy and wonderful they are now and that everything is perfect and the chapter is over and we can just move on.
So Weld confesses that Sveta's attempt to get physical upon his homecoming was not a positive experience for him. And he says, none of it worked. None of it.
Oh no.
Oh no. Yeah, I think that my heart sunk in my chest. I think that I felt all of the emotions that Victoria was describing herself feeling So
yeah, well, and I think the one thing that I think the chapter does a really good job of is like build up to this moment, right? Like where you know they're wrapping things up, and Weld kind of waves her down, in like I need to talk kind of manner, and in the back of your head you're like, you don't even know what it is yet. And my first thought was, I need to talk to you about how Sveta's actually not doing very good because remember that guy she murdered that girl she murdered that last arc, and she's actually not doing great with it. That was my immediate thought, but it's so much worse than that. But I just love how like through descriptions of him, like how he's dealing, like what he looks like the way he approaches her, the way he frames the conversation, even as he tries to small talk through the beginning of it, you can just tell that this ain't going to be good news. Like that we're about to talk about here is not work related, and it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting that we know these characters so well, even a relatively tertiary character like Weld, that from the beginning of the conversation, his whole approach kind of feels off.
Yeah.
Like he goes out of his way to get Victoria alone, and I don't know. It all feels kind of weird, and then eventually you realize why.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, because he's about to talk about some real personal shit.
Yep. I like how he keeps saying like, "Is this too much? Am I saying too much?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is this TMI?
I could never talk to anyone." Yeah. So Victoria asks if he can communicate what's wrong, and he just shakes his head immediately, and he says that he feels like he's played along with things for too long, and like with this and with other things, like with the food, but he can't see this. He can't see the sexual part ever working. And he says it takes what we can't have and pushes it into my face.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important when he starts this conversation, it kind of feels like he's made up his mind already. And I think that's really important to how all this stuff happens. Like, can you communicate? No, I can't. No, it's not going to work. And you get the feeling like I think there's understanding behind that feeling too, right? Because like he's probably been struggling with this for a while now. He was probably struggling with it when they were together, and then he goes on this mission, and he has a lot of time by himself in the downtime of them fighting a big war on another universe to think about these things and to kind of work through and process this stuff on his own. And then he comes home, and then he's confronted by her and just says, "Okay, I'm just gonna try." And at the end of that experience, he probably feels just like he did before he left. And it's like, okay, it's getting to the point where I have to do something now because this ain't working. And so he does. He goes to someone for advice, and he gets some advice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my like overall take on this whole conversation, my expert opinion is like, this is the attitude. These are the word choices of someone who deep in their brain has basically decided that they're going to break up with someone.
Yeah.
And is like elaborately dancing around admitting that fact to themselves or to anyone else, but mainly to themselves actually. Because
we see that he's driven by guilt about this, not just guilt about hurting a person he cares about, but case 53 related guilt. Like there's so much complex stuff circling this whole thing. And yeah, I mean, admitting that, not only to another person, but to yourself is very, very difficult.
Right.
And that's like, we're going to talk about this a lot, and I think we're probably going to, I can't be impartial about stuff like this because I've gone through, not similar to this, but I've gone through some breakup shit that impacts my impartiality. So we're going to try to talk about what we think the text is saying about this, but we think we have to get a little personal too. We have to. But
yeah, I mean, everyone has their own life experience about this kind of thing, right?
Right.
But yeah, so he does mention, as soon as he says the words breaking up with, Victoria pokes him in the shoulder, summoning up the wretch to do it and like shoving him into the wall and damaging the wall and the window frame.
Yeah. Holy shit, right?
Yeah.
What I love about this scene, on top of it just being like just wonderfully soul crushing writing that just like makes you feel all the things, which is what writing should do. I love that Victoria, through it all, like even if she makes choices that I personally don't agree with at the end of the day, she's so like wonderfully immediately defensive of her best friend. Like you got to respect the loyalty with which she cares about Sveta, to the, like, she's going to use the wretch to push him into, like, that's a big deal, man. Like, that's not like it's like, it's surprising. It's kind of shocking, but I'm like, okay, like at least you're super loyal. Sort of.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great character moment. And I like that it's not that the text, you can do it both ways, right? But I like that in this case, the text doesn't say like, I felt a surge of anger and defensive rage on behalf of Sveta and I blah, blah, blah. It's just like, she's like, what? Yeah. And she knocks him into the wall and it's very like organic. And like, she's not even, she's so angry and upset that she's not even really being like self-aware about it.
Yeah. So Matt, I noticed a lot of chatter after this chapter came out about people wondering if like Weld has a thing for Victoria, right? And I think this might just be people like doing their thing where we try to imagine the worst possible outcome of this whole thing, because that certainly it seems to be where the story goes sometimes. And the worst possible outcome for poor Sveta is that the guy she loves is actually in love with her friend who has a body. But then you like the only like textual version of this I could see that supports this hypothesis though is like when she shoves him into the wall so hard, he's like actually pretty close to feeling pain there.
Yeah.
Like she made him feel something, and she's got that body that he likes. He likes
Yeah.
he likes that body.
He likes girls' bodies.
yeah.
He's mentioned this.
So I could definitely see a potential for this, and yes, it would be just the worst possible thing.
I mean, the text juxtaposes the idea, pretty much all of those ideas you just mentioned within this chapter
Yeah.
of him, you know, not really being physically compatible with probably like a normal flesh and blood woman, but here's a flesh and blood woman who can actually make him feel things.
Right.
That's got to get the wheels turning, right?
Yeah, and you're very comfortable, being very honest and communicative with her.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So eventually she deflates a bit, like her anger kind of cools off when she realizes he can't really be blamed for his feelings here, even if it's all completely fucked. He ends by confessing that he's not sure if the love he feels for Sveta is like the love that he would feel toward a mate or toward like a friend or a
what, Weld? What were you gonna say? Like, the thing I love about this is as we go through this chapter, like, it's pretty much systematically like ticking every single Sveta was worried about Weld feeling this way boxes, right? Like every moment of insecurity that Sveta has shared with Victoria about her feelings and her worry about what Weld is feeling is basically proven true throughout this chapter, which is awful. So like it is possible, like, remember the point where she's like, I'm worried he sees me as like a little sister. So, I mean, it's possible that he was going to say that, but I don't think he would like pause uncomfortably and not say sister, right? Someone on Twitter responded to me as I was going through live tweeting and say, arguing that he was going to say pet, which would be just awful.
That would be just the worst thing.
Yeah.
I assumed it was going to be sister because that's what Sveta's afraid of.
Right.
And like, it's like, I feel like him saying that word out loud would be like the guillotine blade descending on the relationship. So like
that would be him admitting. Yeah.
He can't even say it. I mean, that's, yeah. Well, also, God, what a horrible thing to say in front of Victoria, right?
Oh,
specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
In fact, if he bit it back, then that's probably why he bit it back, to be like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't go there with Victoria.
Jesus.
Yeah. Actually, now I'm even more convinced that it was going to be sister.
Yeah. I'm really, so we talked about this a little bit, but I'm really into that guilt that he feels as a person, like not wanting to date a case 53, right? Like, I think it's really like a fantastically well-constructed, like very human feeling that he's having, like that by rejecting a case 53, you're basically saying, oh, they're not good enough for me, which is inherently hypocritical, like as in his mind, right? Like Victoria immediately likens this to interracial relationships. She says, like, if you're a black person, you don't have to date a black person. You can date whoever you want. If you're disabled, you don't have to date a disabled person. You can date whoever you want. And I think that's a really apt comparison. And he kind of swats it away immediately, right? He's like, no, it's not like that, because look at like this. This is that, like, that's totally normal. This is not. But I mean, I think it is an apt comparison, because I think, we've finally gotten to a place in our society where those type of things are not seen as a big deal anymore. But I think there's still a lot of like complex emotions around and feelings of guilt at times around stuff like that. And I think that's a very human and understandable way to feel.
Yeah, right. I mean, everything about what Weld is feeling here is on some level relatable and understandable, even if you're like, I just tracked with Victoria's emotions so much in this chapter, like because the text is like, I folded my arms. Weld did much the same. Fuck.
Yeah.
And like that's like exactly, I mean, I felt exactly the same, and yet I can also step back from it and like I just said, empathize.
Yeah.
And Victoria's like stuck in this situation where she's like, this is a disaster and it's like no one's fault really.
Right.
But also I'm pretty annoyed with Weld, but also it's no one's fault.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. You're absolutely right that like even him going into this relationship knowing what he knew about himself, even him having doubts about the relationship as going through it, is an understandable thing. I think people do that a lot. People get into relationships and they're not totally sure, and they want to be like, okay, I'm not totally sure about this. I'm not sure if I'm feeling it, but I just want to see. I just want to see if maybe that will change. That's understandable. But the problem is once you kind of get to a point where you've made the decision that no, I this isn't, my feelings aren't changing, this is not working out. That's the time where you got to cut and run. You got to get out of there because if you continue forward on that path when you're pretty confident in your feelings, then you're just starting to be cruel, and that's where we're heading.
Yeah, right. Well, that's where it's and not just because Weld is somewhat incompetent as a romantic partner, but also because of Victoria's involvement here, because she makes him promise not to do anything until he's talked to her, and to come up with a reason for the breakup that is not an honest reason, and also to not do anything for a month and a half. Yeah.
She says 2 months, and his response is, okay, month and a half. Like, because those 2 weeks, they're just like, Weld has made up his mind. There's no doubt in my mind that he knows, he sees the writing on the wall, and he doesn't want to face it because it's hard. Of course it's hard. You're going to have to hurt a person you really, really care about. That sucks. But leading them on for a month and a half, knowing the way you do, that's really bad.
And, the thing that most makes me afraid of the potential of this idea that he's actually into Victoria is the fact that now, when and if this actually happens, Sveta's going to be like, hold on, you've been talking to Victoria behind my back for a while about this. It sounds very sketchy, right?
Yeah.
Like when you step back from it and you look at all the pieces, it sounds very sketchy. Even if he's not actually into Victoria, it sounds very sketchy. It's the kind of thing that could be horribly misinterpreted, and made much, much worse by the fact that she's asked him to kind of sit on it like this. Yeah, I mean, it's them kind of conspiring together.
The thing is, they're both talking about Sveta because they both care about Sveta, and they want to do the least amount of damage to her as possible. But they are two people getting together, discussing another person's feelings and deciding what she can and can't take, and when and where we should do it, and that kind of stuff. And that from the outside certainly looks like a huge betrayal, which is like one of Sveta's big things is betrayal. Is people lying to her and betraying her, and it's just this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be an absolute disaster. And there's a lot that you can say about this idea of not telling the person the true reason you're breaking up with them, because that would be too painful. And people do that all the time, right? It is very rare in situations in this world where you break up with someone and you're just totally honest with the person. You're just like, I don't think you're good looking anymore. Sorry.
Right.
People don't do that. And I get that. But I also just we're in a book, and I know that that kind of deceit about that kind of stuff is going to come back around to bite you in the ass, because I have been dumped and told a reason, and I found out the real reason a few months later. And let me tell you, finding out that someone was dishonest with you while they were breaking your heart makes it way, way, way worse. And I just it's going to be, this is a shitty, awful situation for everyone involved. I feel bad for everyone in the situation. I do feel bad for Weld. I feel bad for the situation Weld's got himself into. But I just waiting a month and a half and figuring out the adequate lie to tell her before you break her heart. This is going to be disastrous.
Yep. I agree. It is. And I I'm not really joking that like I was like upset and worried about this all week ever since reading this chapter. I guess I don't know. I don't know if books affect me more than other people, or I wonder if other people have been similarly like out of sorts, thinking about like, oh my God, Weld, no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it triggered some memories in me, and that's, I think, my upsetness around this chapter was probably just connecting those dots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. I think it probably triggers memories for me too, but like a different palette of them. But yeah, I mean, it's very, very human, relatable kind of thing, and really lands, you know. Yeah.
Look, breaking up with people sucks. Sometimes you have to do it. You always feel like shit. You always do. There are right ways to do it, and there are wrong ways to do it. And I'm worried they're heading down the wrong way.
Yeah, Victoria needs to find an acronym for breaking up with people, because currently she's not doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And she says, if you break up with Sveta, meet a gorgeous girl, and break Sveta's heart again, I'm obligated to throw you into the center of the Atlantic Ocean. Weld winced. Sveta's dished on my weaknesses then, I guess? Not really. Fear of mine. So he's basically saying this is a terrible fear of his. And somebody on the Discord actually reminded us that Weld willingly went on a prolonged sailing voyage with Sveta before the start of the story. So like he was actually exposing himself to this danger for her.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, Matt. He does love her. Like, it's just not the kind of love that Sveta has. It's not the same kind of thing. And you got to communicate that. Like, you got to let them know what's going on.
Yep. So we then jump from this horrible interaction to another powwow with Tattletale. The Undersiders, Breakthrough, and many Heartbroken are present in the Breakthrough headquarters. So the meeting with the heroes was sparse and empty, and the meeting with the Undersiders feels too hot and too cold at the same time to Victoria. So it's weird. Yeah.
So exactly what she wanted in the other situation, she's got it, but it's weird because of the people. It's also weird because they're in Breakthrough headquarters, right? Like they're invading their space. Like we have Heartbroken playing with Chris's video games that they found. It's just like they're there. They're in their second home. And fucking uncomfortable, Victoria says.
Yeah.
I don't. So the thing that I want to talk about there, like the weird thing about this for me, we have this bombshell of a conversation that you said made you feel bad, for a week. Victoria doesn't think about it throughout any of the rest of this chapter and any of the next chapter, right? She doesn't. Nowhere in her internal narrative does she mention Sveta or Weld or the stuff that was discussed in that thing. She has little moments in here where she kind of looks over at Sveta, but she doesn't interact with her at all. In fact, when we get to the point where they split up into different teams, they're on different teams. I think like Victoria's like dealing with this in a very like closed off kind of way. Like, okay, I'm going to shove that aside and not think about it and not worry about it. And I think like we see her uncomfort with a lot of stuff that's going on, and maybe her reticence to speak up or argue in some situations in the rest of this chapter as kind of like a betrayal of her messed up emotions as a result of that conversation.
Right. Yeah. I think she's avoiding Sveta maybe, and doing it in a way where she's not even aware of it. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, and not only avoiding Sveta, but avoiding all of it, like mentally avoiding it too.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that that's kind of a thing with her in general.
Yeah.
So in this kind of interesting setting, we have Ashley off to the side talking to Florence, who is trying to give her some kind of fate worse than death. We're not actually sure what, but we've just got this kind of feral child who's like trying to harm Ashley while Ashley talks to her.
She's like,
kind of funny.
She's like tied up or something.
Yeah, tied up by the whip.
Yeah. Just, more reminders of the Heartbreakers and their potential terribleness.
Yeah, just surrounded by things meant to put you on edge constantly.
Yeah.
The various members of both teams communicate pretty effectively with each other without any real hostility, and they settle on a three-pronged assault simultaneous assault on March, Cradle, and Love Lost. That's the plan they go with. I think like the only real sniping in this whole meeting is actually between Foil and Tattletale, which goes further to emphasize that idea that Foil is not happy with the Undersiders right now.
Yeah, and I think it links back to that to Tattletale's interlude, right, where she sensed some stuff in Foil, and her response was to just be super rude back to her, and that's what we see here too. Like we see like Foil doesn't even get to finish her statement. You can be such a such a bitch sometime. Is that what you're gonna say? Yeah, well, at least I'm upfront about it, which is like you're hiding your feelings toward me. So it's like I love that we're seeing that insecure nature of Tattletale and her relationship with Foil like come out in different ways here. I like that a lot.
So this is definitely the relationships arc so far, because Foil is a member of the Undersiders entirely because Parian is a member of the Undersiders, and Parian is a member of the Undersiders for complicated family and financial reasons, and doesn't really feel, I think, that she can be freed of it, but it's their romantic relationship that keeps her bound there. So I think this chapter, and I think this arc in a greater sense, is actually exploring this idea of all these little hooks and intricacies and pitfalls and the dark side, if you will, of relationships, of romantic relationships specifically.
Are you saying they're blinded by love?
I think that's exactly right, actually. Yeah. I was joking with that, but as I said it, I was like, oh yeah, wow, that just works. Yeah. Okay.
So, we need to say one more thing before we move on. Because Victoria comes up with her own plan, right? Like they decide to go with this 3-pronged strike plan, but that was not Victoria's plan. Victoria's plan was we need to take out our stuff first, and then we'll do one of your stuff, and then we'll do our stuff again. And everyone in the room is basically like, no, like I actually like this other one better. Like everyone said, the only person that doesn't get involved is Tattletale, who is staying out of it, which is what triggers the whole Foil yell at talk. But everyone else is like, no, it would be better if we split up and do this 3-pronged strike. And Victoria doesn't argue like at all. She just says, oh, that's what the group wants to do. I'm going to go with the group. And she says to herself, sometimes with groups, a mediocre plan that everyone was on board with was much better than a fantastic plan with disgruntled people and people who had no idea what they were doing and why. So like even upon agreeing with this 3-pronged attack plan, she still thinks it's a bad one. She's just going with it, not to rock the boat. And along with this being, in my mind, like indicative of Victoria's kind of like disheveled state right now, where she's like maybe just like emotionally exhausted from the whole Weld conversation. It also shows that like it's another thing when it goes wrong, which we know it is going to go wrong. When it goes wrong, it's another chink in Victoria's like, I was right. People should just do what I want them to do, type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it is actually good leadership to be willing to go with what the team wants, because it's something the team understands.
I agree, yeah.
But like I think the flip side of it is she does think it's an inferior plan, but she just doesn't have like the energy to fight for it or to persuade them that it's a better plan.
Right.
Well,
it's like
she doesn't even like rally back and say like, well, let me try one more time to try to explain what I mean.
Yeah, no.
She's like, oh, okay, well, all right, whatever.
It's like, for example, if I'm in a group of people and I say, let's eat chicken, and then someone else goes, I think I'm going to eat poop. And then like everyone else is like, oh yeah, let's eat poop. Yeah, that's great. And you in the back of your mind, you're like, no, poop is gross. We shouldn't eat that. But you're like, all right, everybody wants to eat poop. I guess we'll eat poop.
Yeah. Basically.
I mean, it's not literally that, because the argument of which plan is actually inferior or not is up for debate. But in her mindset, it is a bad plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't focus on that too much when I read it, but yeah, she's going along with the plan that she doesn't like, and we already know it's not going to work out well. And don't
eat the poop is the lesson.
Don't eat the poop. So we go into the poop eating chapter 11.5. The chapter opens with this kind of slightly disorienting description of this spider climbing a building, which I think maybe is on some level supposed to evoke Cradle's multi-handed spider robot Warframe thing. But as the description resolves, we realize that it's actually a spider doll made by Parian, and that Foil is using it in an extremely complicated and dangerous way to scale a building.
Yeah, but she's Foil, Matt. She's got it.
Yeah.
I like your comparison to the Cradle hand thing. That didn't occur to me as I was reading, but I like that. And once I read that, I went back and read the intro to the chapter, and I could see where the text is kind of maybe leading you there a bit at the beginning before it reveals the truth. I kind of like that.
Yeah. So the needle points are joined by Victoria and Rain from Breakthrough, and Aroa, Candy, and Chastity of the Heartbroken. So like we get a bit of background on this team selection. Apparently it was partially a matter of solving the wolves, chicken, corn problem of basically making the team such that they don't kill each other, rather than any like specific attempt to get useful power synergies.
Yeah. So this whole working together plan continuing to go super well.
Yeah, right. That was like ringing alarm bells in my head where I'm like, okay, you had this many capes to choose from and nobody put any thought into power synergies. You're basically just trying to create team units where they aren't just explicitly horribly dysfunctional. Great.
Woo! This plan, they're eating the poop.
Yep. So Victoria thinks the team has far too many wolves, which is an interesting description, recalling the fact that Swansong referred to herself as a wolf in sheep's clothing earlier. And then also like the moment where Victoria reflected on that later and said, in the chapter where they're hunting imp, she'd called herself a wolf earlier, and I could see it now. Pack hunting, stalking, dead serious and very dangerous. So I like this kind of repetitive idea of wolves.
Yeah, I like that.
And yeah, we also learned the compositions of the other groups. So one group hunkered back in the vehicles is 3 Heartbroken, Chicken Little, Sveta, and Capricorn, along with Tattletale, and that group is going after Cradle. The other group is Imp, Florence, with 2 other Heartbroken, Lookout, and Swansong, keeping an eye on March until Rachel arrives, at which point perhaps they'll attack her. So basically, we are table setting, right? Like
Yeah.
we're priming us with where everyone is and who they're after, so that this knowledge is already in our brain when it comes time for us to, use it. And of course, we understand by elimination that Victoria's group is the one going after Love Lost.
Yeah. And as much as I kind of agree with Victoria, especially with my future sight, that this is a terrible plan. I love the split up mechanic as like a storytelling device, because like we're taking our limited point of view of Victoria first person and excluding all the other characters we care about from it. Right. The characters we're probably most worried about in relation to the last few chapters of information are Kenzie dealing with everything that happened with the whole Chris situation, and Sveta dealing with everything that happened, or everything in our minds about the about to explode Weld situation. And they're been removed from our main character's point of view. So we don't get to know what's happening to them. And note that they're also put into different groups, which I think is again clever, because now they're divided. So we're worried all over again. Wildbow uses this device in the past, right? Like one of the reasons why the Lime Center chapter was so tense is because our group was divided and we couldn't see what was happening to the other members of the group. We might be able to get out of here without being seen, but will they get out of here without being seen? And he used that general tension of not knowing to ramp up our concern for everything that's going on. And it works again really well here, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So the group discusses the idea that powers are inherently not trustable and not helpful, and Parian is kind of the one taking this position pretty hard.
Yeah, I know that Parian's like true power has become something of a meme in the community, but I enjoy like seeing that like the reason she's not using her power appropriately or correctly. The reason she hasn't used the true power, right, is because still here, even in this moment, she still doesn't trust it. She doesn't trust her power. She doesn't like her power, and she doesn't like using it. And I that's just like consistency of character that I really like.
Yeah, I like that idea because it could mean that like she knows what her secret power is or has an inkling of it, but doesn't like it. Or it could mean that like she just doesn't even trust or enjoy her power enough to like try to figure out what it could be.
Yeah.
But either way, I think it lines up nicely with like the character whose power has a secret true use is the character who strongly distrusts powers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we look back at Taylor and how much she increased her power just by like studying it and using it and pushing it to its limits. And when you're a person that doesn't trust your own power, you're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
I really like this whole talk about powers, right? And I really like how it ends because we're talking about these characters and like the general sentiment is everybody has a shitty time. Like every cape has a really shitty time, and then the argument is, well, some have it easier than others, and it's like, yeah, true, undeniably true. Perian says, but easier still isn't easy, and Victoria says, I like that distinction. Because I think, and I like that coming from Victoria, because I bet a lot of people would look at, Victoria's early life, especially as a second generation cape, and say that she got off pretty easy, at least at first, right?
Yeah.
Like in their Glory Girl times, she got off easy as compared to a lot of other people. Now that obviously changed, but
yeah.
But I like her, enjoying that distinction for very personal reasons.
Yeah, good point. I didn't make that connection to the idea that like this is Victoria specifically saying it. I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. Cool. So during this downtime, while Foyle scouts the rooftop, Chastity decides to fuck with Rain by coming on to him. Perian warns him off in the most dire possible tones. And I don't know, like I quoted a huge amount of stuff here, which so like there's this stuff where like he starts blabbing to them about Aaron. Precipice, I said, don't tell them that. Don't share that information, especially when Perian is warning you. Trying to keep my partner from falling off a building, Perian said absently. You might be more in more danger, Precipice. Noted. And then later, like he's like started talking and then been stopped a couple times, and then it goes on and says, Precipice, against all sense and sanity, opened his mouth to explain. I'm flattered, but even if it wasn't really weird, even though she and I aren't together and might never be, stop sharing information about your love life with the people who call themselves Heartbroken, I said. I turned to the younger Heartbroken. No offense. No, you're totally right, Candy said. Yeah, Precipice said. He managed to stay silent for 2 fucking seconds before telling Chastity, I can't mess around, at least for now. I'm not doing anything in that neighborhood. Oh my God, this whole part is so wonderful.
It is. It's so great. But like, here's another relationship, Matt. Here's another one. So let's talk about this for a bit. Let's talk about Aaron and Rain a bit. Because this has been, it's been a year now since we talked about the story, Matt, and we've been dealing with Rain's unrequited love for Aaron since almost the beginning of that story.
Yep. And we found a wonderful Parahumans way of bringing that back into the frame.
Yep. But I think I want to break down the relationship. Because I think this is so fascinating when you look at the trials and tribulations of Rain over the course of this story. So let's just journey through it. Let's remind ourselves of everything that's happened so far before we move on to talk about this. So the story starts. Rain is very clearly in love with Aaron. He's really attracted to her. He really likes her, but he sees himself as like the shitty, unworthy person. So he just doesn't he won't ever do anything about it. We kind of get some very explicit hints towards her just seeing him as a really good friend, and that's all. And then terrible things happen, and Aaron is being forced by the Fallen to marry and is basically given to Rain. She admits that she really only ever saw him as a friend, but if she had to marry someone, well, I guess it could be him.
Yeah,
And then
it could be worse.
Yeah, and then as soon as she started thinking in that line of that through line, suddenly she says, "Hey, you're actually attractive. Like you got that '90s grunge thing going on." And then she loves him now. She loves him. And of course, he rejects her. He turns her down because the stipulation is they have to stay there with the Fallen, and he can't do that, and he won't let her do that either because it will destroy her too, and he knows that, so he rejects her, and that's the end of that whole thing. Then Rain, as part of the whole Fallen War, saves Eren and her family. She apologizes to an injured Rain and apologizes for being so angry and thanks him. Then says specifically, "Can we just go back to being friends?" Ouch. So we see him back in the friend zone. Then when we next see Eren, she's hanging out with the new and improved Rain. She's hanging out with a Rain that's more confident. He's got that new haircut. He's kind of a changed person. And she seems a little flirty with him, right? Like I think that's something we called out in those chapters, that she was kind of not too like subtly flirting with him.
Yeah, and especially when he's in his extremely cool form,
right?
With the hologram. But yeah, like she does seem to be flirting with him, and like maybe even like sitting slightly too close to him, stuff like that.
Yeah, but he seems pretty unaware of it, right?
Yep, I agree.
So that's their journey through the story so far, and now we learn that he's still like really, like he says here that he loves her, like he says he likes her a lot, maybe even loves her. That's not. This is not good. This is not good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, where does this relationship? I think there's too much baggage in this relationship for anything to ever happen. Like, I just feel like they've gone through too much complex emotional shit. Like, I don't know if like someone being almost brainwashed into falling in love with you is a recoverable state for a relationship going forward.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, my mind goes to like a whole different place where it's like more like the practical realities of like let's say that he did like, you know, make an overture and they started dating. Like, what does that look like? Because he has this like crazy cape life and he's being hunted by people who are trying to murder him. She's a normal person and she's like trying to deal with her family being fallen or being ex-fallen or whatever their situation is right now. And I'm just like he, and then for like beyond that, she's kind of this person who's like a city person. Like she's very stylish, and he's like his fantasy, like his literal fantasy is to go live by himself in the woods in a house.
Yeah.
So like they don't seem very compatible. Now, I would add the addendum that I actually don't think that compatibility works the way most people think it works. Like you can have a lot of superficial things that are different, but if you get along really well, I think that can make up for it. But all of that aside, it's interesting that I kind of share your worry, but I think for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think in conclusion, it's not healthy for a dude to keep pining over this girl. And what I love about it is Victoria makes it so very clear here that he's so desperate to talk about Eren to anyone who will listen, that even as people are saying, stop it. And he's like, noted. But actually, I'm going to keep talking. But it's like, dude, come on.
Yeah.
This is a bad idea.
Right.
This is a bad idea.
He's got some things on his chest. Needs to get him off his chest. And yeah, I mean, God, it is really funny to me how before we started this discussion, I did not realize that this was going to be the Matt and Scott talk about relationships for 2 hours episode.
But it is.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's all over everything. Yeah.
Send us your relationship questions and we will provide you with our incredibly sage advice.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good idea for a new segment for the show, like a romance advice column.
Like, I've been married like 2 years. I don't know if I'm going to call myself poster child for successful relationships.
Yeah, we're really good about talking about this story. So, so Victoria has a brief heart-to-heart with Perian over why she's staying with the Undersiders. And it's mainly, as we said before, that her family needs care after being bone sawed.
Yeah, which is a pretty great reminder of like this awkward situation that exists, right? Where we've like amnestied all these horrible monsters, but like their victims are still out there suffering in the world. I wonder, like, could Bonesaw not fix them?
I thought about this for a minute, and I was like, maybe they just don't want to go under the knife. Yeah. With Bonesaw specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I don't. I just feel like if you have, I feel like the PRT, like, she shouldn't have to be with the villain group for people to take care of her parents at this point, when the person who was responsible for that is like sitting with the good guys now. I don't know. It just,
yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, it's
just
the
a bummer
kind
to
of thing,
hear.
right? I don't even know exactly what's the deal, right? Like, Bonesaw can do plastic surgery that's essentially magic, but no earthly plastic surgeon can do or can undo, for that matter, what Bonesaw does. So it's more a matter. Yeah, I don't know. It's left as enough of a question mark that we can just kind of say, like, yeah, whatever the situation is, she needs more financial resources than hero work can give.
Yeah, which is sad. It's sad.
Yeah. So there's this important bit where it turns into Chastity telling him that she would have hurt him very badly if he had been willing to betray somebody that he loved. But since he was steadfast, now she's going to protect him. And it's very anime. I love it.
Yeah, well, it's like, so not only am I worried about Rain because he probably needs to stop being hung up on Eren, but like, this is bad. Like she's like, oh, good. You were loyal, ergo you get to live. Hooray.
Yeah.
And she says this thing like, unrequited or complicated sorts of love are still love, and love is the most important thing. And I think, if anything, what the text is doing, what the text is using Chastity to do here, is to illustrate how unhealthy Rain's continued will they won't they with Eren is, right? Like, because like, if you have, he's has this unrequited love for this woman that's gone on through a year's worth of story, since he's known her, basically. And like, Chastity sees this and says, ah, yes, that is a good thing. Like, it's like, okay, maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe that's the text being like very clearly, that's bad.
Yeah. I don't think I'm as worried about Rain as you are. But I'm interested in your perspective here. Yeah, we'll see.
I don't know if I'd call it like actively like, oh God, Rain's screwed. But I just think like he's talking himself into problems.
Yeah. All right. So Foil signals at them to stop and to take shelter. And she tells Victoria that there's a no man's land ahead that they can't really cross in the open, a gap that prohibits them from sneaking directly up to where Love Lost is hiding out. When Victoria returns to the ground, she finds that now Chastity hates Rain again because he was responsible for killing someone Love Lost cares about. So tumultuous things happening. And Chastity then talks about Heartbreaker driving her and Candy's mom off to die in the wilderness.
Yeah, that's awful. And she blames herself. She says, I didn't do anything either. And this is like this, I think you're right that like she comes in, like Victoria joins this conversation and then Chastity's like really pissed off at Rain. And we're seeing like how fast her emotions swing. But I think they do kind of share a moment here, right? Where it's like they both have guilt for perceived, or in Rain's case, accurate inaction causing the death of people. And like the thing that I love about this is the Heartbroken continue to be these people that are simultaneously hilarious, terrifying, and tragic all at the same time. And they kind of cycle through these three emotions. So you can never really get a firm feeling on them. Like there's never like, if I told you, how do you feel about the Heartbroken? It'd be like, well, that's really complicated.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like she kind of seems to hate Rain for a minute, but then that kind of just like melts into her being sad about the past, And then we're left to wonder, like, okay, but is she still gonna, like, is she gonna try to kill Rain when nobody's looking,
or take
or is
away
it kind of,
or take away the person Rain loves, just like he took away the person someone else loves. Yay!
Good things to think about. So this seems like a really critical quote here. Don't, I interrupted him, don't work to convince them to hate you. He folded all four of his arms, two flesh and two mechanical. Was he so reflexive in trying to own up for his mistakes that he'd make enemies by admitting to them? I wasn't even sure what the right decision to make here was.
Oh, I love this, Matt. I really love this. But this is both, like, I think super accurate to Rain and his continued struggle with his own guilt, right? Like, just because one person has forgiven you, you're not done feeling that guilt. And he's continually struggling with the guilt and his role and everything and how to make it right. And I think there is part of him that wants people to hate him because that would at least make sense. It would like he thinks he's just deserving of hatred for what he did. So yeah, he's going too far.
Right. I like that she calls it reflexive because at this point it almost is reflexive. Yeah. He's just like, he's basically saying like, no, don't forgive me. I really did a horrible thing, and it was not excusable.
Yeah.
And she's like, really, in this context, just shut your damn mouth, Rain. But yeah, I think there's more to this. There's the aspect of like Victoria, whose whole thing for a long time has been like, people should own up to their mistakes, and you should never be able to live down your mistakes. She's the one telling him that.
Right. And she's not sure what to do either. Like, I wasn't even sure what the right decision to make there was. Is it right that he reflexively makes people hate him because that's what he deserves, because he did that bad thing? That's what he deserves. And I think Victoria at the start of this book probably would have said that, right? Like, I think at the start of this book, Victoria would have said, yes, that's absolutely what he deserves. Everyone should hate him. He did this terrible, terrible, terrible thing to people, and he deserves everyone's hatred. And part of his repenting should be to make that as clear as possible to everyone he meets, that he is this person, and everyone should know the type of person he is. And we're seeing her feelings towards that are getting less clear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I would see it too. Yeah. She's very like she's off balance in almost every way now. Like, all of her touchstones are becoming loose and unreliable, and she's unsure, you know?
Yeah.
That's literally what she says. So this interaction is interrupted by the team having to take cover again as a patrol of love lost people passes by. The people in the car see Candy, and we understand that they are actually looking for someone in this area. I guess maybe this ties back into this idea that Love Lost has boosted her sensory ability, and maybe she knows they're here.
Yeah, especially like since we learned that it's like tech sensing, right? And Victoria has been using this HUD thing to check up on her teammates.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I think you're right. So the combined team now enters the sewer drains via Rain's silver blades, just as Lord of Loss flies overhead.
It's our favorite tree bird centaur boy, Matt.
Yay.
It's been a while.
I missed him.
It's been a while since I've seen this guy.
Yeah. Victoria and we get a scare as she looks at her little wrist HUD thingy and realizes that all the other teams have been brutally dismembered. No, wait, it's just glitching out.
Did you let yourself feel that for at least half a second?
I did, yes. Absolutely.
I did too.
A little start of like, oh God. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. So there's a good stretch of confusion and anxiety as Victoria and the rest try to puzzle out what's happening. And then we realize what's happening. The walls start to glow with a faint pink, and creepy nursery sounds become audible. The last communication they receive is a somewhat ambiguous symbol suggesting that one of their three groups is being attacked. And then that's it.
So are you saying that the combined Love Lost Cradle March team decided to do the take out one at a time instead of the split up plan?
I mean, that definitely seems like first of all, we've got Lord of Loss here, who like I don't think he was even like under consideration as being a factor.
No.
And nursery. So like the people who they're fighting right now are actually like mercenaries, not even the people who they were targeting. So like everything is just much worse than they planned for, I think is the idea here.
Yeah, I really got the callback to the take them one at a time plan, and Victoria's, like thinking that was the better plan. As soon as we saw, the idea that 3 groups are converging on one place, my immediate response was, oh, it's just the bad guys are doing the Victoria plan. And the plan that they maybe should have done if she had like fought for it a little more.
Yep, I think you're right. I think that's exactly. I don't know if I caught that, frankly, but I agree with you. Yeah. That's probably what's being said.
So here we go. I think we're gonna have a fight chapter next.
Yep. So that's it. That's all the reading for this week. Let's do our discussion question.
All right.
And next week we will discuss your responses to it at the end of the episode. So the question is, what is the healthiest cape relationship in the Parahumans saga?
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, do we want to say specific, like a romantic relationship?
I like it when people, I think try to make it a romantic relationship, because this is the Valentine's Day chapter, I guess. But like, it can be normal relationship if you find one that you really think is important.
Yeah, if you really want to talk about a non romantic in nature relationship, go for it. Yeah. But I think that's the intent of the question is parahuman romance.
Yeah, or even a non-cape relationship if there's one in particular. But yeah, I think we'll get some fun answers here.
Yeah.
Cool. And that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or on Twitter at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaly85, and Matt's is at Loveline.
If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. We've got all of our weekly shows back in swing now. Fun book clubs. We're doing various streaming of video games at various times too. Right in the middle of that StarCraft tournament, Matt. It's going great. It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I think we're gonna do more of these tournaments going forward.
Yeah, I'm already out of the tournament, but it's fun.
Yeah. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and costume contests, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. And special thanks to new Bidoofs, Naaman and Eamon at the $1 level. Thanks so much. We really appreciate that.
Naaman and Eamon? Thanks, Naaman and Naaman.
Interesting.
Thank you guys.
And as always, yeah, definitely. And as always, make sure you go over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well, because this is his world. We are just playing in it.
And if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can instead help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a rating and a review. This week's review comes from Zorlgodu. Sure.
Yeah.
From our increasingly growing Australian fan base. We have a lot of Australian listeners, Matt. Anyway, cool. Zorlgodu gives us 5 stars and says, "A great show. Worm and Ward are among my favorite stories of all time. I've read Worm multiple times and spend too much of my day thinking about both Worm and Ward and discussing them. So it's high praise that the discussion of Scott and Matt always gives me new angles to consider and ideas to think about. If you haven't read the stories, do so and listen through these old episodes of the podcast as you do, because it will elevate the way you interact with these stories and with stories in general." Thank you so much, Zorlgodu.
yeah, that's so kind. We really appreciate that. Zorlgodu.
I was thinking of doing it in an Australian accent, but I've decided I like our Australian listeners, and so I will not do that to them.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that in an American accent, so. All right, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week with the latest chapters of Arc 11, Blinding.
Don't forget to vote for maybe the song that's playing right now, or maybe the other one that played at the beginning of the thing.